Level 1, the trainee. You step off a bus at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas at 1 a.m. because they process you in darkness on purpose. It disorients you. A military training instructor in a blue campaign hat is screaming before your feet touch pavement. He calls you trainee. He will not call you by name for the next 7.5 weeks. You are one of 45 bodies in a training flight. You are given a bed, a wall locker, and a set of rules so detailed they govern how you fold your underwear. You march everywhere. You eat in 10 minutes or less. You speak only when spoken to. You are a rainbow flight for the first 48 hours because you're still wearing civilian clothes. Then they issue you everything. Boots, fatigues, PT gear, a trainer weapon that doesn't fire but weighs the same as the M16 it imitates. You become indistinguishable from the 45 other shaved heads in your flight. That's the point. The PT starts at 5 a.m. Push-ups, sit-ups, flutter kicks, running in Texas heat that hits 100 degrees by mid-morning. You sweat through your uniform before breakfast. Airmen who can't pass the fitness test get recycled, sent back to start over with a new flight. Week 5, you qualify in the rifle range. Week 6 is Beast, basic expeditionary airman skills training. You live in tents, eat MREs, simulate a deployed environment while instructors throw scenarios at you. Chemical attacks, simulated casualties, night operations with blank rounds cracking in the darkness. It's not combat. It's theater designed to approximate stress. But your hands shake anyway. You graduate on a Thursday. Your MTI shakes your hand and calls you airman for the first time. You are Airman Basic, E1, the lowest rank in the United States Air Force. Your career hasn't started yet. This was just the entrance exam. Level 2, the Airman, E2, then E3. These promotions come automatically, 6 months for E2, another 10 months for Airman First Class. You don't earn them so much as survive into them. Time and grade, satisfactory performance. Don't get arrested, don't fail a drug test. The bar's low because the Air Force needs bodies. You ship to tech school where you learn your Air Force specialty code. Maybe your avionics, maintaining electronic systems on fighter jets. Maybe your security forces, guarding the flight line with an M4. Maybe your intel, staring at satellite imagery for 12-hour shifts. Maybe you're a crew chief, responsible for keeping a $75 million aircraft in the air. You report to your first duty station, Ramstein in Germany, Kadena in Japan, Minot, North Dakota, which the airmen call Why Not Minot, because nobody chooses it, but someone has to. You go where the Air Force sends you. You don't get a vote. You're the lowest person in the shop. You sweep floors and hand tools to people who know what they're doing. You study technical orders that read like engineering textbooks and memorize procedures. You'll execute at 2 a.m. on a frozen flight line when a jet needs to launch and the pilot is waiting and your supervisor is watching and the wind chill makes your fingers useless. The Air Force is not the Army. Nobody's sleeping in mud. The other branches call it the chair force. But the Air Force doesn't measure suffering as a metric of service. It measures capability. Can the aircraft fly? Can the mission execute? Everything else is secondary. Your first real mistake costs time, not lives. You install a component backward on a radar system. The jet fails its check. Your supervisor looks at you with the disappointment of someone who trusted you and now has to explain to the officer why the aircraft isn't flying. Mistakes ground aircraft, delay missions, kill people. You don't make that one again. Level 3, the senior airman, E4, 3 years in. You're not new anymore, but you're not in charge of anything either. You're in the gap between apprentice and leader. The Air Force calls this the journeyman phase. You know your job well enough to work unsupervised. You know the regulations well enough to see their flaws. The jet you're working on hasn't had its avionics upgraded since 2003. The part you need is on back order for 6 months. The workaround your shop invented violates 3 technical orders but keeps the aircraft flying, and nobody in leadership wants to ground the jet because the mission matters more than paperwork. You learn to operate in the space between what regulations say and what the mission requires. Everyone does. The Air Force runs on creative compliance. You start studying for staff sergeant. The weighted airman promotion system determines who makes E5. 2 tests, your performance reports, decorations, time in service. You study for months. Flashcards in the chow hall. Practice tests on your phone during lunch. You memorize information you'll never use operationally because the system measures what it can quantify. The airman beside you studies less and scores higher because he tests well. The airman across the shop studies harder and misses the cut by 3 points. He's a better technician than both of you. You make the cut. Barely. 12 points above the minimum. It doesn't matter. Above the line is above the line. Your supervisor pins on your new stripe in front of the shop. You are now a non-commissioned officer. For the first time, the Air Force expects you to lead people. Nobody taught you how. They gave you the rank and assumed the competence would follow. It doesn't follow. It stumbles forward through trial and error and late nights wondering if you said the right thing to an airman who was struggling and whether the words you chose helped or made it worse. Level 4. The Staff Sergeant. E5. NCO. The Air Force has handed you something it never adequately prepared you for. People. You supervise 4 airmen. You write their performance reports. You counsel them when they fail, and sit in your car for 10 minutes before work, trying to figure out how to motivate a 19-year-old whose girlfriend just left him, and who now can't focus on the job that keeps a $150 million aircraft from falling out of the sky. Nobody trained you for this. Leadership in the Air Force is learned by watching the people above you and hoping they were good examples. Some were, some weren't. Your first supervisor was a technical sergeant who drank too much and covered it with competence. Your second genuinely cared about his people and showed you what it looked like when leadership was a practice instead of a title. You try to be the second one. Your first deployment is Al Udeid, Qatar, the Diad. 120 degrees on the flight line. The asphalt softens under your boots. You work 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week, maintaining aircraft that launch combat missions nightly. The jets take off loaded with munitions and come back empty. You don't see the targets, you just reload and launch. The disconnect between your work and its consequences is both a mercy and a moral fog. The mission briefings sanitize everything. Kinetic operations, targets serviced, effects delivered. Words designed to create distance between the wrench in your hand and the explosion on the other end. A pilot tells you one night at Chow that he hit a building with civilians. Intel was wrong. He says it flatly. His eyes aren't flat. Something has been subtracted from them. You deploy for 6 months. You come home to a wife who managed everything alone. She became the entire household, and now you're back wanting to be half of it. Welcome home means welcome back to a life that learned to function without you. Level 5. The Technical Sergeant. E6. 10 years in. You're a section chief now. 15 airmen under you across 3 shifts. You don't turn wrenches anymore. You manage the people who turn wrenches. You review maintenance logs, sign off inspections, attend production meetings where you argue with officers about sortie rates and manning shortfalls. You've become a bureaucrat in a flight suit, but you understand why the bureaucracy exists. Because when corners get cut and inspections get pencil whipped, jets crash, people die. An F-16 at your last base augured in on a training mission because a procedure was signed off but not performed. The pilot ejected 2 seconds before impact, survived with a broken back. The investigation traced it to a skipped turbine blade inspection. The blade cracked at 30,000 feet at 25,000 RPM and tore through the engine casing. The aircraft became a 20,000-pound glider with 4 seconds of decision time. The crew chief who signed it off hadn't done the work. He was behind and figured it was fine. It wasn't fine. You carry that story like a sermon. You tell every new airman that the signature on a maintenance form is not paperwork. It is a promise that this aircraft will not kill the person flying it. Some of them listen. Some think you're dramatic until they see it for themselves. 7 is the gateway to senior leadership. Only 20% make the cut. The board reviews your entire record going back a decade. One bad report from 6 years ago can sink you. You check the promotion list at 8 a.m. with every other tech sergeant on base refreshing the same web page. Your name is there. You close your office door and sit for a minute. 10 years of work validated by a line on a screen. You call your wife. She cries. You don't, but it's close. Level 6, the Master Sergeant, E7, Senior, NCO. You've crossed a line most airmen never reach. Average time in service is 17 years. You've spent nearly 2 decades in uniform, and the institution has shaped you in ways you can only see by looking at the civilian friends you've lost touch with. They talk about promotions and bonuses. You talk about readiness rates and deployment cycles. The translation gap between your world and theirs has become a canyon. They don't understand why you can't just leave it at work. You can't explain that the work doesn't stay at work because the work involves aircraft that carry human beings, and one uncaught error means someone doesn't come home. You're a flight chief or superintendent now. 50 to 100 people fall under your responsibility. You manage leaders who manage people who accomplish tasks. 3 layers removed from the work itself, and the distance is disorienting for someone who spent a decade with tools in their hands. You approve a schedule change that seems minor but puts a fatigued crew on a midnight shift, and they miss a step on a critical inspection, and the error cascades until someone catches it at the last quality check. Barely. Leadership at this level is about systems, not individuals. You set conditions. You establish standards. You trust the people below you to execute and accept responsibility when they don't. Your second marriage is holding. Your first ended during your 3rd deployment. She was 24 when she married an airman, and 30 when she divorced, a stranger who came home speaking in acronyms and scanning parking lots. Your kids from that marriage are teenagers. They live with their mother in a state you haven't been stationed in for 8 years. You see them in summer if the deployment schedule cooperates. You send money and text messages and hope it's enough. It isn't. The Air Force gave you purpose and took your presence. That trade-off looked acceptable at 22. At 38, the math has changed. Level 7, the Senior Master Sergeant. E8, fewer than 2% of the Air Force holds this rank. Public law caps it. You're a superintendent responsible for an entire squadron's enlisted operations. 200 to 400 airmen who do their jobs because the systems you built work. When they break, you answer to a commander who answers to Congress. Your mistakes make headlines. You spend days in meetings about resource allocation, manning levels, training schedules, deployment rotations, budget justifications for equipment that should have been replaced 5 years ago but wasn't because Congress funded a different priority. The language of military bureaucracy sounds mundane until you understand that every spreadsheet cell represents a human being, and every budget line represents a capability that either exists or doesn't when someone's life depends on it. You've become the institutional memory of your unit. You remember the accidents and near misses that taught lessons now encoded in procedures people follow without knowing why. You are the reason why. A young staff sergeant asks why the pre-flight checklist includes a redundant step. You tell him about the aircraft that went down in 2014 because that step didn't exist yet, and 3 families got a knock on the door instead of a phone call saying, "Welcome home." He doesn't ask again. Your knees ache from decades on concrete. Your back hasn't been right since you lifted a panel wrong on a C-17 12 years ago, and never reported it, because reporting meant being grounded from deployment, and being grounded meant letting your team go without you. Hearing reduced on the left from years beside running engines. The VA will quantify this damage eventually. Right now, you just turn your right ear toward anyone who's talking. You carry 22 years of knowledge and the quiet understanding that the institution will continue after you leave and will eventually forget everything you learned the hard way. Level 8, the Chief. E9. Chief Master Sergeant, the highest enlisted rank in the United States Air Force. Fewer than 1% wear it. Average time to reach it is 22 years. You're the senior enlisted leader for a wing of 5,000 airmen. Your job is no longer technical. It is entirely human. You're the voice of the enlisted force to senior leadership. When a general makes a decision affecting thousands of families, you say what no one else will. That the deployment extension will break retention. That the housing is unacceptable. That the airmen are tired and the tempo is unsustainable. Sometimes they listen. Sometimes they nod and do it anyway because the mission doesn't negotiate with morale. You attend every promotion ceremony, every retirement, every memorial. You stand at attention while flags are folded into triangles and handed to spouses trying not to collapse in front of 500 people in dress blues. An airman in your wing took her own life 3 months ago. She was 22. Nobody caught the signs. Or maybe the signs were there, and everyone was too busy to look. You think about that distinction constantly because the difference between those possibilities is the difference between a system failure and a personal failure, and you're not sure which is worse. You stood in front of the wing and talked about resilience and resources. The words felt necessary and completely inadequate. You are responsible for everything and in control of very little. That is the paradox of senior enlisted leadership. You set conditions, build culture, communicate standards, and then trust 5,000 human beings to do the right thing every day, knowing some carry weights you can't see and problems you'll never hear about until it's too late. When they break, it's your failure. When they succeed, it's their achievement. That imbalance is the job. Level 9, the retiree. You retire at 26 years. The ceremony is in a hangar. Your wing commander presents you with a flag, a shadow box, and a certificate signed by the Secretary of the Air Force. Your family stands beside you, your second wife, who survived 4 deployments and 6 PCS moves, and the loneliness of military marriage. Your daughter, who attended 5 different schools before high school. Your son, who once asked why you couldn't have a normal job. You didn't have a good answer then. You still don't. You take a defense contractor job because that's what retired senior NCOs do. They hire you for your clearance and your knowledge. The pay is good. The work is sterile. You sit in meetings about procurement timelines and think about airmen right now on a flight line fixing jets in 110-degree heat because the mission doesn't wait for comfortable temperatures. You miss mattering. You miss being the person 5,000 airmen looked to when things went wrong. You miss the wait. That's the part nobody tells you about retirement. They talk about the pension and the health care and the freedom. They don't talk about the absence of purpose that hits on a Tuesday morning when nobody needs you anywhere and nothing depends on your decisions, and the phone isn't ringing because you're no longer in the chain of command. You're just a man in a house with a shadow box on the wall. You fill the space with projects and mentoring young NCOs who call because you're the only person who's been where they're going. You tell stories only a room full of veterans can understand. Your wife sees a lighter version of you at those reunions, more present. She doesn't say it, but you both know the person in that room is who you've always been. The civilian version is the performance. Level 10, the cycle. Somewhere in San Antonio right now, a bus is pulling up to Lackland Air Force Base. It's 1 a.m. The air is thick and hot. The doors open and 45 recruits step out carrying bags they're about to lose and confidence they're about to have stripped away. An MTI in a blue campaign hat is already screaming. The recruits are scared and trying not to show it. Some enlisted to fly, some needed money for college, some had nothing better and the recruiter made it sound like adventure, some because their father served and the uniform feels like inheritance. None of them know what's coming. They don't know about the deployments where heat melts boot soles and boredom is more dangerous than the rockets, the midnight shifts on frozen flight lines, fingers too cold to grip a wrench, the marriages that won't survive the 4th PCS move, the children who attend so many schools they stop making friends, the funerals, the airmen they'll lose to a training accident or a deployment or the quiet darkness that follows people home. They don't know the Air Force will give them purpose and community and a pension and will also take years from their bodies and relationships from their lives and sleep from their nights. They just know they're here. Standing on a curb in Texas in the middle of the night, being screamed at by a man in a hat, wondering what they've gotten themselves into. They'll find out. One rank at a time, one deployment at a time, one signature on a maintenance form at a time. Some will serve 4 years and leave. Some will serve 30 and forget how to be anything else. The ones who stay will become the institution. They will keep the jets flying and the missions launching and the country defended. The bus pulls away. Another one is already coming. The cycle begins again.